me begin. So yesterday we started discussing vacuum decay and quantum field theory. So today we will try to work out the details. So let me remind you where we did. So we started with an action. This is in the Lorentzian signature, which is integral d4x and we took the potential to have two minima, one a local minimum, one a global minimum. So this is what we called phi A, this is what we called phi B. And question you are interested in addressing is, if we consider a vacuum, false vacuum, that you get by quantizing around this, what is the probability that it will decay into this vacuum over here? And this probability typically has to be measured in the sense of per unit time, per unit volume. Okay, because you are thinking of the way this vacuum decay is supposed to happen is that you are supposed to form a bubble such that outside you have the vacuum phi A, inside you have the vacuum phi B, and the bubble wall is supposed to expand. Okay. So the generic question that you have to address is, what is the probability of such an amplitude, such a process to happen, say per unit time, per unit volume.
But if we had like other vacuums also, like phi B, phi C kind of thing, then other vacuums also, then for a bubble creation, there should be a chance, right? Like
yes, exactly.
Phi B can pop up or phi C can
exactly. Yeah. So we are trying to calculate the probability that phi B will pop up.
But when there are no other vacua,
yes,
how is it this probability different from that case?
Well, nothing may pop up, right? Well, the point, as long as this probability is small, they are independent, right? You calculate the transition probability to each of them separately, right? Once the probability becomes of order 1, then of course you have to worry because the volume will reduce, right? So the effective probability will go down. Okay? But as long as the probability is very small, you can treat them independently. So the way we approach this is to first construct an Euclidean action. Okay, so let me now describe what is it that we have to do. Okay, and the justification of this we gave last time by starting with WKB of a system with many degrees of freedom, and what we are describing here is just a generalization of that to quantum field theories. So we take an Euclidean action AC, which I'll write here d4x. So I can write this as d tau d cube x and half delta phi square plus half delta phi square plus d5. Okay, yesterday I had also subtracted out here minus d phi a. Okay, that will of course not affect any of the equations of motion. So today I will not subtract this, so that it just becomes directly integral continuation of this with the minus sign. And then eventually when you describe the probability, we have to subtract it out. So in terms of this Euclidean action, the decay probability was some constant, which of course we didn't calculate, times exponential of minus b, where b was the Euclidean action evaluated on the bound solution minus the Euclidean action evaluated on phi a. Okay. So this phi a basically means phi of x is equal to phi of a. Equal to phi for all x. What is a bound solution? So bound solution is a tau dependent solution which has a property that phi of tau x goes to phi a or tau goes to constant. Okay, and in fact we showed that as a consequence of this we also have another relation phi of tau x goes to phi a or mod x goes to infinity. So basically we can combine this to say that phi of, well let's not combine this right now. So the idea here is that each of these may be infinite. Okay, in fact, in the AC of phi a you can easily see is infinite because all these terms are all 0. There is a v of phi a, right? When you integrate it gives you infinity, but the difference is finite. Okay, because basically the bound solution locally is different from phi a, but for large rho, okay, for large tau or large x, it becomes phi a. Okay, so the integral doesn't diverge from infinity. Okay, so that's the way we should think of this about this expression that I have written here. Okay, that you should really think of this as being inside the integral. So I could have taken it as v of phi minus v of phi.
So the tau dependent contribution comes from the bounds configuration.
Yes, exactly. Tau dependent contribution comes from the bounds configuration. Okay, phi a of course is independent of tau or x. Okay, now I could have chosen my convention so that this is at 0. Okay, then that is equivalent to what we were doing yesterday, v of phi minus v of phi a. Okay. And here I am perfectly allowed to do this. Okay, the only reason that I have not done it is because when you do gravity, okay, then of course it will make a difference as to where the 0 is. Okay, because gravity couples to the absolute value of the energy density. You cannot just shift it up and down, okay, because that's cosmological function. So for the discussion that I am going to have most of today, okay, you could have avoided some of the complications by simply setting v of phi a equal to 0, okay, so that you don't have to subtract this at all. Okay, so our goal is to calculate this b, okay, which is appearing in the exponent. But to calculate b, of course, you have to first find the bound solution. Okay, then you can evaluate the Euclidean action and subtract.
What are the limits of integration? It's minus infinity to 0, right? Or 0 to infinity?
No, minus infinity to infinity. Tau goes from minus infinity to infinity, x goes over the whole space. That's because there is a factor of 2, if you remember. Right? That factor of 2, if you had explicitly put in a factor of 2, then it will be from 0 to infinity. But then he said that the bound solution, right, if you just include the return, right, then you don't have to worry about putting this factor of 2, you just integrate over the whole space. Right? For one dimension, of course, it is trivial. Right? You just you can multiply it. In 3 dimensions, you will see that it has it is useful to think of it this way. Because now we don't have to worry about the limits of integration, you just integrate over the whole space-time volume. Euclidean space-time. Otherwise, you integrate only over half of it, positive tau, right, and then multiply by factor of 2. So the bound solution will be invariant and a tau goes to minus tau. is that we try to simplify our life by making an answer that the bound solution is spherically symmetric, okay, O4 symmetric, and the reason is that this action is O4 symmetric, okay, there is no distinction between the space and tau, and the boundary conditions that you want to impose are also O4 symmetric, right, because you basically want to impose that as long as other mod x or tau, any of the x coordinate or tau becomes large, the field should go to 0. Okay. So assume that phi is a function of rho only, okay, where rho is square root tau square plus x square. But I should have told you that this, whatever I am going to discuss, is very old work, right? Coleman's work in the mid 70s, right? Coleman, and then when we do gravity, coupling to gravity, that's Coleman Dirichlet. Okay? Both are in the mid 70s. Okay, the other point that we mentioned yesterday, okay, was that the interpretation of the solution at tau equal to 0, right? Suppose you have found a bound solution. Okay. At tau equal to 0, okay, what is the interpretation of the bound solution? So at tau equal to 0, if you look at the solution, okay, phi still is varying with space coordinate x, and the total energy of the solution we showed is 0. Okay, why is it 0? Because this is a general result. Okay, if we just look at that, think of this as a field theory potential minus d of phi. Okay, so as a consequence of the equation of motion, we know that the following is true: the delta of integral d cube x half that phi square plus d of phi equal to 0.
And this follows from the invariance under tau reparameterization.
Well, yeah, this is a condition that we have got from invariance and tau reparameterization. But what I am saying is that the fact that the tau derivative of this is 0, this follows from the equation of motion. Okay? The fact that we will set this equal to 0 itself follows from the reparameterization. Okay? But at this stage you don't have to say that, because as long as you are saying that phi of tau of x goes to phi a as tau goes to plus minus infinity, okay? This, well, let me put a minus in phi a. Okay, this addition of this doesn't of course change anything because it's a constant. Okay, but now we can see that as tau goes to plus minus infinity, this quantity is actually 0. This vanishes as tau goes to plus minus infinity.
But in the original constraint, there was that first term also, del tau phi square, right?
Oh yes, you are right. So let me write that one. So I think it was something like delta of phi whole square minus this whole, right? This was where potential is minus d of phi.
Yeah.
Okay, so this was the constraint. Now this whole thing vanishes as tau goes to plus minus infinity. At tau equal to 0, this one vanishes because delta of phi is 0, right? Okay, phi is changing, it's a bound solution. Phi is reaching the end and returning back. Okay, so at tau equal to 0, this is 0. So which means that this must vanish at tau equal to 0. Right? So this you can think of now as a classical configuration in the Lorentzian theory with zero energy, right? Which means that it has no excess energy compared to the original phi vacuum or phi a vacuum that we had. Okay? So original phi a vacuum was phi equal to phi a everywhere. This configuration just look at the tau equal to 0 configuration of this. Okay, this corresponds to some blob over here. Okay, we don't even know whether it looks like a bubble or anything, right? It corresponds to some blob over here. Far away, of course, phi is equal to phi a. Okay. This blob has the property that this has exactly the same energy as the phi equal to phi a value. Right? Because that's what this is saying, that this integral is 0. Okay, because delta of this being 0, that just follows from the equation of motion. Okay? And the fact that this itself is 0, that follows from the initial condition. Okay? Which is of course also necessary because of the reparameters invariance that we had. Okay? So this configuration of tau equal to 0 can be interpreted as some kind of classical configuration of 0 energy to which the system has started. And this classical configuration now can evolve classically. Okay? And we will see that this classical configuration, at least in certain limit, indeed is like a bubble that you are looking for. Okay? A bubble where it's inside is phi b, outside is phi a. This has exactly the same 0 energy, okay, related to the phi a vacuum. Okay? That sort of be this solution. And then it can start expanding. At the cost of, so we will gain potential energy because phi b region is expanding and that energy is getting converted to the wall of the bubble. So that will be a classical evolution, but what I am trying to say at this stage is that the interpretation of the solution of tau equal to 0 okay, is the classical configuration of 0 energy that you produce by this tunneling procedure. Okay. In the WKB, if you look at a particle like WKB, from here you land here, right? We calculate the transition prior to this point and then you evolve classically. Okay. Here the situation is more complicated because the classical configuration at this point is not a uniform phi configuration. Okay. That will be too much, that will cost too much energy barrier. Okay. It's a configuration in which phi is equal to phi b inside, phi outside, okay, with some bubble energy. Nevertheless, it will have 0 energy, the analog of this. Okay. The property of this is these are exactly the same energy as this. So similarly, this blob that we create, the bubble, the bound solution at tau equal to 0 is going to give you the analog of that 0 energy configuration, analog of this in quantum particle mechanics.
So the thing is that the bubble doesn't actually begin from a point and grow up. It just
No.
only appears and then
Exactly, because it's quantum tunneling, right? Bubble cannot classically begin at a point and grow, because if the radius is too small, right, then the surface tension is going to pull it back. Right? There is no it can grow. So it has to have certain radius after which it can classically grow. Okay, so this part of the evolution is not classical. Okay, that's why we are doing it in the Euclidean formulation. We are trying to calculate the transition probability using the Euclidean axial formulation. Okay, so this is the interpretation and you should keep this in mind ultimately when you use it. Okay, any other question? So now let's go ahead and try to find the bound solution. Okay, what is really important. So the action is given here. So let me keep this. So one can show the phi equation, one can easily derive the phi equation from here. In fact, okay, let me write this action first. Okay. So this becomes 2 pi square. Because we have taken phi to be a function of rho only, okay, we can do the angular integrals. That gives you this 2 pi square integral. This is the volume of S3, right? This is a 4-dimensional integral, so the angle is the volume of S3. So 2 pi square integral 0 to infinity d rho cube, and then half del rho phi square plus d phi. Okay, this is the integral action. And from this you can derive the equation of motion. Which is this, okay? So this is almost like the one-dimensional problem. And the reason that it has become almost like the one-dimensional problem is because of the assumption that bound solution is spherically symmetric, is O4 invariance. So it's as if there is only one coordinate, right? Even though it's really a quantum field theory problem with 4 coordinates. But there is of course a difference, and the difference is this one. In the one-dimensional problem, the equation was d2q d tau square is equal to d prime of q, okay, and you could interpret this as a motion of a particle in an inverted potential, in the potential minus v of q. Now this also has a particle interpretation. So think of rho as a type. Okay, think of rho as type. If this term had not been there, then this would be the motion of a particle in a potential minus v of phi. The effect of this term is a friction term. It's acting as if it's a friction, okay, but the friction is rho dependent. It's small for large rho, it's large for small rho. Okay, so it's a rho dependent time or a time dependent friction coefficient. Okay, but otherwise it can be thought of as a motion of a one-dimensional particle in a potential that is inverted. That's minus v of phi. To plot minus b versus phi, like this. So again, the situation is that we have this is not phi a, this is not phi. Okay, and you want that as rho goes to infinity, it should be here, phi. So phi should go to phi as rho goes to infinity. What about as rho goes to 0? Well, we don't know what should happen to it as rho goes to 0. That's the interior. And the reason that we don't know what happens to it, because we know that the total energy has to be conserved, okay, but we don't know how much is the surface energy, how much is the volume energy, and so on. Okay. So rho will start somewhere between phi a and phi b. That's what we expect. Now let's think of this now as the motion of a particle. We want the particle to approach phi a as rho goes to infinity, okay, as time goes to infinity. What kind of a motion is this? Okay, so you have to start from somewhere on this end and it will eventually roll up there. Is this clear? Okay, at rho equal to 0, we have to start from there and eventually send it there. Now, first question I would like to ask is that how do you know that there is a solution? Okay, there may not be a solution, right? So how do you know that there is a solution? Okay, and now we will try to show why there is a solution. So the boundary condition at rho equal to 0. Okay, in fact I should have said del rho phi is 0, okay, because otherwise there will be no analysis. Phi was a function of square root of rho is basically square root of tau square plus x square, right? So unless the derivative of phi vanishes, the derivative of phi with respect to tau or x will become ill-defined at that point. So if it's a function of square root of tau square plus x square, then take for example del tau x, right? So this is tau over square root of tau square plus x square times f prime square of tau square plus x square, right? Okay. So if f prime of 0 is not 0, right, then you see that as tau and x goes to 0, then delta of f will depend on direction from which you are approaching this. Right? So delta of f, okay, from different directions will go to different limits. Right? And we don't want that. We want f to be a smooth function at the origin. So that basically shows that f prime of 0 should be 0. Okay, so you have to start at rest. Okay, that's what it means. That we are looking for a solution, and at rho equal to 0, we start at rest. Is this clear?
So under this change from tau x to rho, tau goes to minus infinity also maps to rho equals to infinity.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so that's why it bounds, means it comes to some non-trivial configuration and then it goes back to the trivial configuration phi.
So in some sense, it's not like an S matrix.
No, it's
It's
the
not like-
whole thing is being done in the Euclidean space and it's not settled in a S matrix. Right? It's a classical solution to Euclidean equations of motion. Is this okay? So we have to start at rest, right? That's what it is says. The fact that del rho f is equal to 0 means that we start at rest. Okay? Start at rest and you have to reach here. How do you know that there is always a point where you start? If there is no friction, then it's trivial, right? To show, you just go to the same energy and drop the particle from there, right? It will eventually come and sit here at 0 goes to infinity. The problem is the friction, right? Friction causes loss of energy, right? So clearly, if you start from here, okay, it will not reach, right? So if you start from here, it will undershoot, right? In fact, if you start from anywhere in this region, it will undershoot. Okay, so you have to start from somewhere between here and here. Okay. So how do you know that there is a starting point which will actually reach there? Maybe when you start from here also, it will undershoot. Right? If the friction term is too high, then even if you start from this side, it will not be able to reach. Right? So what we will have to argue now is that there is indeed some starting point where you can reach here. Right? Otherwise, there is no bound solution. Is this clear? And the argument, in fact, is reasonably simple. Imagine that you sit at phi b itself, right? Then classically it's not going to move at all. Okay? It is going to sit at phi b for infinite time. Imagine that you go a little bit to the left of phi b. Then what's going to happen is that it's going to start rolling, but very, very slowly. Okay? You can make it as slow as you like by starting close enough to phi b. And eventually, of course, it will roll, and then it may or may not reach, right? That you have to see. Okay, is this clear? But now you see that the friction term goes as 1 over rho. Okay, so which means that you are starting at rho equal to 0. Okay? But if you can delay the start of roll sufficiently, then the friction terms become smaller and smaller. Right? Because friction term goes as 1 over rho. It's a time dependent friction. Okay? So which means that if you start sufficiently close to phi b, you can ensure that the effect of friction is negligible. Okay? And in that case, you basically just overshoot and go down. Right? Because by energy conservation, if friction is negligible, then you reach here with positive kinetic energy and you overshoot. Is this point clear?
Can you explain why near phi b friction is negligible?
No, not near phi b. Doesn't matter if the friction is negligible near phi b, right? Because the kinetic energy you are gaining along the road, right? And that's what friction uses, right? Near phi b, of course, it's sitting at almost at rest, right? So the friction term is not doing anything because d phi 0 is very small, right? So as long as you are close to phi b, right, you are rolling very slowly. So friction effect is not there anymore. Right? The friction effect comes when you start rolling. Okay? And what I am saying is that if the start of roll happens at large value of rho. You are starting at rho equal to 0, right? That starting point, there is no choice. That's a boundary condition. But by taking phi to be sufficiently close to phi b at rho equal to 0, you can ensure that when it actually rolls, right, when the significant rolling starts and the friction term becomes dominant, rho has already become very large. Okay? And if rho has already become very large, then this 1 over rho term basically kills you, right? There is no friction effect left. There is very little friction effect left. Okay? In that case, it will just roll on the other side. Okay? So now we say that if we start from here, you know that it cannot roll up. If you start from sufficiently close to phi b, then it can roll and go to the other side, right? So somewhere in between, there must be a starting point where you roll and reach exactly this point.
One question. So, like, have you used like the difference between phi A and phi B at any point in this analysis?
So far, no.
So far,
No.
So
Only that phi b has to have a phi a.
even if they are slightly different, phi A and phi B,
Yes.
there still is a point at which
Exactly. There still is a point, because even if phi a and phi b are sufficient size, slightly different, but that's the approximation that we'll be using later. Even that, then, okay, by staying very very close to phi b, you just delay the effect of friction as much as you want, right? And once you have done that, then even a little bit above phi a is enough to take you down the hill here. Is this okay? Right? Because, and the reason that you can do it is because of this, that the friction turn is 1 over rho, okay? Which basically means that for large rho, okay, you can effectively think of this as a one-dimensional problem, right? If it's spherically symmetric, right? At large rho, it's like a one-dimensional. The wall is almost plane, right? If there is a bubble, if there is a transition from phi a to phi b, it's almost plane, right? So that's effectively like a one-dimensional problem, and that's why the friction term is negligible. Is this clear? Okay. So this shows that the bound solution always exists, right? And if you want to do it in the general case, okay, then you have to basically, this is all you can do at this stage. You can numerically evaluate the solution, and once you evaluate the solution, you can calculate the difference between the Euclidean action of the bounds and the Euclidean action when phi is equal to phi a, and that's what is going to give you the term in the exponent, right? How big is the transition probability? So that's a general procedure of how to calculate the transition probability from vacuum A to vacuum B. Okay? Of course, we have not calculated the p-factor, right? Because there is p-factor terms exponential minus b. That exponential, whatever appears in the exponent is what you have calculated.
What will be the interpretation in the bubble picture? Like not in rho, but if I want to understand in terms of tau and the picture.
Yes.
Like there you said like the bubble has like come up, and then it will start evolving with
Yes.
with time.
Yes. So evolving with time, of course, is a new Lorentzian geometry, right? That is not going to see here, right? This will only give you the tau equal to 0 configuration of this. Is going to give you the shape of the bubble. Okay, so tau equal to 0 is the basically phi of tau equal to 0 x will be phi is a function of rho only, right? So this will be phi of mod x, or this is phi f of mod x. Okay, f is the function that we calculated here. That function is going to tell us the shape of the bubble at or shape of the field configuration that arises from this quantum tunneling, and now you start with that and then you want to classify. Okay, so this f of mod x is the field configuration. So you start from uniform A vacuum, right? Then by quantum tunneling you create the field configuration where phi is equal to f of mod x. Right? The same function f. Okay. Except that instead of being a function of rho, which was a function of square root tau square was mod x square, now it's just a function of mod x. Is this quite clear? Okay, so now we'll try to do some analytic, get some analytic results, and for this you have to use an approximation.
Sorry. So
Yes.
the information of the true vacuum phi b, so that enters through the boundary condition.
No, that never enters. In this, and the reason that it never enters, right, is the same as that of this potential, right? If you take a one, even in the one-dimensional case, suppose you have a thing like this, right? If you are here, all that matters is that you have to tunnel here. Once you have tunnel here, then classically you roll down to the true vacuum. Right? So that's why the information about the true vacuum, it never enters directly. Okay, in this indirect argument, to show that there exists a starting point, there exists a bound solution, we have used the information about the true vacuum, the fact existence of the true vacuum. But otherwise it doesn't enter, right? Well, it enters indirectly in the shape of the potential, of course, right? Because the solution itself will depend on the shape of the potential. Is this okay? Okay. So now let's consider the thin wall approximation. And this is the case when V of phi b, V of phi a minus V of phi b is small. Okay? So let me first describe intuitively what we expect to happen in this case. V of phi b minus V of phi a small, meaning that this height, this is minus b, right? That this height is a little bit above this height, but not too much. Okay? So now you see that odd between, but you can have a starting point, right? We really didn't have to start close to phi b, right? In fact, if you start too close to phi b, it will just overshoot. That's your idea. But now you are more constant, because now we can see that the phi b is only a little bit above phi b, right? So you cannot afford to lose too much energy by friction, right? Because you only have the phi b epsilon amount of energy available to you, right? Maximum epsilon amount of energy that you can lose by friction, right? Because you have to start somewhere between phi b and phi a. Okay? This height is epsilon. So you have to make sure that we avoid losing energy as much as possible as we roll down from B to A. Now how do you do that? Okay, we do that by using exactly the same trick. Namely that now we really have to delay the onset of the rolling as much as possible. Okay? If epsilon becomes small, okay, then it should really start, the actual physical solution should be such that it starts rolling very late, right? From phi b to phi a. You have to start very, very close to phi b. Is this clear? So now if you look at the solution, what we expect? Phi versus rho. That as rho goes to infinity, we know that it approaches phi a. Phi a is something like this is phi a. But now we are saying that as rho goes to 0, you really have to start very, very close to phi b. Right? If you start reasonably far away from phi b, it will start rolling faster, quickly, and then the friction will kill you, right? You will not be able to reach the top. Okay? So now we expect that we have to, if this is the phi b line, we really have to start very close to phi b when you start rolling, and then somewhere it should remain close to phi b for a long time, and then at some point it will roll down phi b. Is this clear? Why this has to be large? Because you have to delay onset of friction. Right? You have to make sure that the friction is small. Right? If you start rolling too fast, then the friction is large enough to take away all your energy. Right? That small amount of energy epsilon that you have will be gone, and you will not be able to reset off. So this is then the general structure you expect. Okay, this is rho bar. This is what I call rho bar. Okay, so you can say rho bar is the, you can just define rho bar as the value of rho, okay, at which say it reaches midpoint between phi A and phi B. Okay, that's just a convention. Okay, that's where it's rolling. Okay. So the point is that this part of the rolling we expect will be not too slow, because once it has started rolling, right, once it has gone a little bit away from phi B, okay, then of course this part of the potential is steep, right? Here it will roll at order 1 time. Okay. The effect of small epsilon is that it will simply delay the onset. Is this clear? So this is the shape we expect. Okay. And now you see that this is exactly what you expect of a bubble, right? It's the same function. If this is f of rho, okay, then the bubble or the t equal to 0 classical configuration is supposed to be f of x, mod x. Okay, this has one less dimension, but this is the solution of tau equal to 0 by the spherical symmetry assumption. F of mod x will have the feature that for small mod x, it's b, phi is equal to phi b. For large mod x, it's phi equal to phi a. And around some rho bar, the solution will make a transition from phi b to phi a, but that transition will take place over a width of order 1.
And that scale is set by epsilon.
This scale.
This width.
No, this width is not set by epsilon. Right? Epsilon sets how long
I see.
you will remain here. Right? This width is set by the shape of the potential. Right? This whole shape of the potential. Right? How much it goes down and how much it goes up. Okay? Because in this, the rolling is almost frictionless rolling from here to there. Right? That's a. That part of the rolling is not slow by any reason. Right? The slowness comes from the initial points and the final point. Is this clear? So the idea now is that we will try to make this more quantitative, and the way we will do it is to notice that this part of the rolling, because you have already said that the friction term should be small, right? So it's as if there is frictionless rolling. So most part of the rolling, actual rolling, can be thought of as a frictionless rolling in a potential with two equal heights. Right? You can have equal to the distance between phi A and phi B, right? You start from the potential of two equal heights and you roll from one to the other. Okay. So you introduce a potential, so you can write d of phi and u of phi plus some epsilon w of phi, where this has the property that u of phi a is equal to u of phi b, and w this is some finite function. It's clear that you can always write this potential as a sum of a potential which has equal heights between a and b, and then you add a small correction, another function multiplied by epsilon, to correct for the fact that the actual they are not equal heights, they have unequal heights. Okay, but that you can correct by a small function, so no one coefficient epsilon. Okay, and the idea is that this shape over here should really be controlled by u of phi, right? Because this is a rolling in this part of the potential, and here the v of phi and u of phi are more or less the same, right? That they differ by order epsilon, right? So the fact that there is an order epsilon term affects the solution very little in this region. Okay? The effect of epsilon comes only at the very ends, okay? Which is to fix how much you should delay. Right? The smaller the epsilon, the longer the delay should be, right? Because the friction has to be reduced even further, right? For smaller epsilon. So epsilon should control the position of rho bar, right? And the shape here should be controlled by this u of phi. So that's the general idea. So we'll then solve this problem in two stages. One is that find the shape, then find rho bar. Okay? These are the two informations we need.
The solution we are considering is we are starting from phi A,
Yes.
and then it is going to phi B at t equal to 0, and then it is coming back.
That's right. Yes.
So it will lose some energy in the first rolling also from phi.
Yeah, but this, I mean, when you have written in terms of rho, right, we are only thinking in terms of between rho equal to 0 and infinity. Right? We are thinking of, so now we have just reversed the problem. It's the same differential equation, but we are just interpreting it slightly differently. Okay? At rho equal to 0, we start from the other end. Right? Initially, you are thinking of starting from rho equal to infinity and going down. Right? Then it will be more like anti-friction because it's proportional to d phi d rho. Right? Okay? Right. So now we are thinking of rho as being time in going forward from 0 to infinity. Right? So the end point should be phi a. Right? Initial point should be something somewhere close to phi b. Is this okay? But when you are right that when you think in terms of tau, right, then you should really start from phi b, go to some place, and then go back to phi b. Go back to phi a. Right? Phi a to some non-trivial configuration of phi a. But in that language, there will be anti-friction. If you just look at the same equation, right, now you are evolving. Now minus rho is the direction in which you are evolving. Right? Okay, that's why. Even though you have to go from lower energy to higher energy, right, because of this fact there is anti-friction, right, you can do that. Intuitively, it's much easier to think in terms of friction rather than anti-friction. Right? That's why you are thinking of the rolling from 0 to infinity. Okay, any other question? Okay. So now, then the shape is controlled by d2, let me call it d2, d2g, d2f, d2 square equal to u prime. Why? Because the full, let me write the full equation. d2 phi d rho square is 3 over rho d phi d rho equal to v prime of phi. Right? This was the equation. Now I am saying that for as far as shape is concerned, the v can be replaced by u, and this term can be ignored because this friction, you know, the effect of friction has to be made small anyway. Right? So during that rolling, the friction term will be negative. So you have to basically solve for this equation. Right? So this is an equation for one-dimensional problem. Okay, and this f. So now you see that this now you can think of as an equation in one dimension. Rho you can think of as running from minus infinity to infinity. Right? This equation by itself doesn't tell you the rho has to stop at 0. Right? Imagine the rho is just a variable which is running from minus infinity to infinity. Okay? So this is exactly what I mean by solid. Okay? A solution that f of minus infinity and f of infinity. So as rho goes to infinity, it should reach phi a, and here it should reach phi b. Because after all, if you think of minus u versus phi, then the potential is like this. Now we have equal height. One is A, one is B. And we want to start from here and then roll down here. Is this clear? So suppose the solution is f of rho. So this can be found once you know the shape of U. Okay, in particular if you take U to be quartic, right, the standard quartic potential, I square minus A square whole square, then this is standard tan hyperbole. That one can explicitly find a solution, which interpolates between phi and phi. Yes.
Rho is a distance from a point, right?
But here you just think of it as barrier. Okay? Don't think of it as distance from a point. Eventually when you apply to the final formula, when you put things together, then of course rho will be the radial coordinate, right? It can only go from 0 to infinity. But I'm saying that because this is now like a one-dimensional problem, there is no reason, nothing which tells you that rho has to end at 0, right? You can continue the solution all the way to rho equal to minus infinity. And this is the kind of boundary condition on the solution. Now, we can also see that this equation is translation invariant. Okay? The breaking of translation invariance in rho was due to the friction term, that was 3 over 2, right? That we have ignored anyway. So now, formally this equation is translation invariant. So if f is a solution, f of rho plus c is also solution for any c. Yeah, just translating it in rho space. So how do you fix it? Let's fix it by saying that f of 0 is phi a plus phi b. Just my definition. So then f versus rho has this shape that it goes from phi b to phi a around 0 in the origin. And this width is of order 1. Okay, order 1 basically means there is a factor of epsilon over here. Okay, because if this U doesn't know about epsilon, okay, this is of order 1. Is this clear? So now you see that from this picture you can now write the solution. Okay. So the approximate solution for phi, approximate solution for phi is f of rho minus rho bar. Why? Because phi satisfies the same differential equation, right? Approximately, as I said, in the region where it's of any relevance, right? That this part of the region, phi satisfies the same differential equation because v can be replaced by u approximately, right? Or epsilon term equal ignored. Okay. So phi has the same shape except that phi starts rolling somewhere at large value, right? And I have assumed, I have declared that rho bar is a place where phi goes through phi a plus phi b by 2. Okay, so if you compare it with this, you basically see that phi, the shape of phi should be the same as shape the f, except that it will be shifted. Right? F changes at rho equal to 0 by construction, phi should change at rho equal to rho bar. Is this point clear? So now the only thing that remains to be determined is rho bar. Right? Because if I can determine rho bar, you have determined the approximate solution. Okay, and then of course you calculate the Euclidean action to find out. Now,
So ideally, this solution is valid when phi is away from phi and phi.
no, when phi, this solution by construction is also that if as rho goes to infinity, rho equal to 0,
Okay.
right? You see, when f is close to rho equal to 0, right, this is f of minus infinity. Right? The rho bar is large. Right? So if f of minus large negative argument, and there it is, we have chosen this to be phi b, right? Okay, so by
But somehow there should be some corrections due to the fact that phi b and phi b a are not close. But if they are not close enough.
exactly, if they are not exact close enough, there will be some correction. So this is not exactly equal to phi b; it's phi b plus corrections, right? But to leading order, this is the correct shape of the solution. Okay, and so to leading order, as far as the leading order solution is concerned, the only part that remains to determine is rho bar, right? Because what you have argued from intuitive grounds, the rho bar should be large, but you have not determined what rho bar is, right? How large should rho bar be? Okay, so now to determine rho bar, there are different ways to do this. So I'll describe one method and then I'll show that it's also concept to the other one. So the method that I'll be using is that I'll now evaluate the Euclidean action with this solution by setting phi equal to f of rho minus rho bar. Okay, the result will depend on rho bar. Okay, and then by requiring that the result is extremized with respect to rho bar, we can determine rho bar, because after all the equations are determined by extremizing Euclidean action, right? What we have done here is we have just left one parameter undetermined, right? We can still determine it by variational principle using the same Euclidean action. Okay, so that method we will use, because if I use that method, then at the same time, okay, it will also tell us how the value of the Euclidean action, right? Which is also what we want to know, okay? Because that's B. So the other method for evaluating rho bar will be to use the energy conservation law that we have been using. At tau equal to 0, the field configuration is given by f of mod x, same f, okay, with now rho being interpreted as mod x, f of mod x minus rho bar. So you can use that configuration, evaluate the energy, and you know that that energy has to be 0, right? Because that's the boundary, that energy has to be exactly 0 according to boundary condition. What we will find is that that energy is not exactly 0 unless rho bar takes a specific value. Okay, that will determine rho bar, and these two will be consistent, of course, right? Because after all, that equation energy equal to 0 equation came by applying equations of motion and the boundary condition. So it can't be that you will get a different result, but we will verify that that 2 gives the same result. Now, let's calculate AC of bounds minus AC of phi. Okay, this is for extremization, of course, this is not necessary, but eventually you want to do this anyway. Okay, and the point is, if we don't subtract this off, then we will get an infinity that is floating around. If you have to subtract of anyway, so you might as well subtract of AC of phi. So this is, we wrote down the expression for this 2 pi square integral 0 to infinity rho cube d rho half d phi d rho square plus b of phi minus b of phi. And we will evaluating for phi equal to f rho minus rho. Okay. Now we will evaluate this by dividing this integration region into 3 different parts. First part will be when rho minus rho bar is much larger than 0. Well, let us call it much larger than 1. Okay, rho minus rho bar is a large number. In this case, d phi d rho will go to 0, right, because this approaches phi a, and v phi minus v phi a will also go to 0 because phi approaches phi a, right, for large rho. So this gives you no contribution. Then rho minus rho bar much less than, sorry, rho bar minus rho much larger than 1. Okay, so which means rho is below rho bar, okay, and sufficiently far below. Okay, so that again f of rho minus rho bar has settled down to phi b. In this case again d phi d rho term can be ignored, but the volume integral gives you a v of phi b minus v of phi a. So you will get integral 0 to rho bar minus some number, rho bar minus some k. In fact, k is a large number, large but fixed number, say fixed finite number, rho cube d rho times v of phi b minus v of phi a. This is of course nothing but minus epsilon. So that gives you minus epsilon times quarter rho bar to the 4 plus subleading. Okay, this is rho bar minus k to the 4, but k is some finite but large number. Okay, rho bar is parametrically large you are taking. So this gives you rho bar to the 4, that's the leading contribution to this integral, and then there are terms about rho bar cube, etc., which you are ignoring because those are smaller anyway, right? Because rho bar is large. So you can take this to be minus 1/4 epsilon, minus 1/4 epsilon rho bar to the 4.
K is much smaller than rho bar.
K is some large but finite number, say, right? Because you want to make sure that f has, see, f has a width of order 1 around rho bar, right? So you can go sufficiently far away where it's larger than the width, right? So that f of rho minus rho bar has already settled down to its asymptotic values, right? So you take k to be some large but finite number, set k equal to 50. Okay. Then f of rho minus rho bar will settle down close to its asymptotic value, right, which is phi b at one end and phi a at the other end. Okay?
If K was order rho bar, then I think the final result.
No, then of course the final result is different. Right? So I am taking k to be a large but finite number.
Okay.
Right?
Large
Because
is much smaller than rho bar.
much smaller than rho bar. Yes, exactly. Right? Because rho bar is parametrically large. So, whereas the width of these are order 1, right? So what I am saying is there is some value you can take between 1 and rho bar, okay, which will make this become small, but nevertheless it will not affect this very much, right? Take for example k as rho bar to the half. Suppose you take k to be rho bar to the half, right? Then it's large in the rho bar goes to infinity limit, large rho bar limit. So f of rho minus rho bar will then still go to its asymptotic value, right? And at the same time, rho bar minus rho bar to the half, when you expand it out, the leading term is still rho bar to the 4. Okay? The extra terms will be suppressed with respect to the leading term. Is this okay? So that's what we are saying, that the case is large, but not large enough so that it's comparable to rho bar.
And what is the comparison between epsilon and rho bar?
We have not said so far. We will have to determine that, right? Rho bar will turn out to basically 1 over epsilon. But epsilon is multiplying the whole thing anyway, right? So whatever you add here will be subleading compared to the rho bar to the 4. Okay, the third one is the soliton contribution. Okay, that's the place where it's changing over. Third contribution is the contribution over a finite region around rho bar. Okay? Is this clear? Finite region around rho bar. In that region, so because the integral is running over a finite region, this is not going to give you a large term, right? It's running over a finite region around rho bar. These are all finite. Okay? So what we can do is that we can basically replace V by W, by U, because the difference between V and U is of order epsilon. Okay? Now an order epsilon term could give large contribution, okay, by integrating over a large range, right? That's why like here you got epsilon term rho bar to the 4, right? Because this was integrating over a large range. Okay? But order epsilon term integrated over a finite range is not going to give a large contribution. Okay? So in this region we evaluate it as, so this is the region rho bar of order rho bar. Here what we evaluate is 2 pi square integral rho bar cube d rho half, sorry, rho cube d rho half d phi d rho square plus q phi minus c phi. Is this clear? Okay, because over a finite region it makes no difference. But this in fact is a finite integral. Okay, because this integrand, now integrand, if you look at the integrand now, the integrand in fact goes to 0 when rho is either very large compared to rho bar or small compared to rho bar. Why? Because when rho is large compared to rho bar, it becomes u of phi a minus u of phi a. Okay, that cancels and this goes to 0. When rho is small compared to rho bar, this becomes u of phi b minus u of phi a. But u of phi b by choice is equal to u of phi a. Okay? Because the fact that the v of phi b is not equal to v of phi a is, that part has already been included in this integral over here, right? That's why that we now replace v by u. So once you have replaced v by u, okay, these two are the same, and hence this integral is forced to get contribution only from regions around rho equal to rho bar. Okay, if rho becomes too large compared to rho bar or too small compared to rho bar, then the integral is 0. So this is a finite integral. Okay, and in fact we can make this even more explicit. What it means is if you take 2 pi square, now you see that rho, because rho ranges over a finite value around rho bar, I can just replace rho by rho bar and pull it out of the integral. Okay. And now this is nothing but the integral that determines the mass of the one-dimensional solid. So this integral knows nothing about rho bar. Right? Rho bar information has gone away completely because the solution now with a substitute for phi equal to f of rho minus rho bar, right? And you can just shift rho minus rho bar equal to x. Okay? Nothing depends on rho bar anymore. Okay, so substitute phi equal to f of rho minus rho bar, okay, and declare u or x equal to rho minus rho bar. Okay, so this integral is just now can be written as minus infinity to infinity dx half df dx square plus u of f of x minus u of Is this clear? So this is in fact what we call sigma. This is surface tension. Okay, and this if you think of this as a one-dimensional solution, this is the energy that this one-dimensional solution carries. So I can now write this as 2 pi square rho bar cube sigma. So this gives you B as 2 pi square. 2 pi square I had forgotten. Then I write it. 2 pi square times rho bar cube sigma minus 1/4 epsilon. Okay, so now you can extremize del B del rho bar equal to 0 will give you 3 rho bar square sigma minus epsilon rho bar cube equal to 0. So rho bar will be 3 sigma by epsilon.
Limit of integration, why is it minus infinity to infinity?
Because it doesn't matter, because this is going to 0 anyway when x becomes much larger than 1 or much larger than 0 or much less than 0, right? So you might as well integrate from minus infinity to infinity. Right? Otherwise you have to integrate from minus rho bar to infinity, right? Because rho integral is only starting from 0, but it makes no difference because these are approaching the integrand actually going to 0 very fast away from the rho equal to 0, the x equal to 0 region. Is this clear? Okay, this you may recognize in the first day, well not first day, maybe the day before yesterday, when we looked at the classical energy of a bubble, right, we wrote it as A r cube plus B r square, right, and then we got the formula for the R, okay, in terms of A and B, okay, and we had a formula exactly like this, okay, 4/3 pi r cube times the volume energy, that was like epsilon, right, and then 4 pi r square times sigma. That's gave rise to this formula. So here, of course, this is the rho bar at which the bound solution is located. Right? This is the bound solution. This is a solution in 4 dimensions, right? 4 dimensional Euclidean space. Inside it's phi b. The classical configuration from where the classical evolution will start. Right? So it's the same. The rho bar has that way. These 2 different interpretations. It's the radius of the bubble, okay, that we get from the bound solution, but it's also the radius of the real physical bubble from which you start evolving the classical configuration. So B we can calculate now. B at the extremum. Okay, so basically you have to substitute this value of rho bar into this expression for B, and this you can easily check is given by 27 y squared sigma to the 4. Okay, so in the exponent this will come as e to the minus this quantity. Okay, that's the exponential part of the tunneling probability.
So the critical value of the radius will be when b is equal to 0. Right? When the bubble will form.
No, that is this rho bar. See, this is a full bound solution, right? Okay. But now the point is that this is the solution in the 4-dimensional Euclidean space. Okay. What is the interpretation of that? It has tau equal to 0. Okay. That interpretation is that this is the solution to which it is tunneling to. Okay. Tau equal to 0 is a 3-dimensional solution. Right? This is a 3-dimensional configuration to which it is tunneling to. Right? That is the bubble that we discussed on the first lecture. That where it has exactly the same energy as the original vacuum, but now this bubble can expand classically. Okay, so this same solution, okay, at tau equal to 0 is the bubble. Okay, and at tau equal to 0, all you have to do is that here it's a function of rho. Okay, here the bound solution you have gotten as a function of rho, okay, which is square root of tau square plus x square. Okay, you just have to set tau equal to 0. Okay, so if you interpret rho as mod x, okay, the same solution describes the starting bubble, which will now evolve classically. Is that point clear?
Yeah, but this probability b.
Yes.
You're extremizing it means when it is maximum. I mean, there's a maximum probability of forming a bubble of radius over, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So because the way we set up the problem, right, we have to maximize over the all the paths, right? So here the point is we got the solution, right, by some indirect means, right? By looking at the approximation schemes, and we said the rho bar we could determine from that argument. Right? If you actually solve the equation of motion, you will determine rho bar, right? But what we did is we took that rho bar as a parameter, substituted it into the action, and then extremized with respect to rho bar. Okay. Now I will show how to do it using equation of motion directly. Okay. So let me do it anyway. That may make it also clearer that where the bubble is forming. So alternate derivation. Which is the equation of motion plus dc at tau equal to minus infinity or plus minus infinity tells us that the following is true. Integral write the signs correctly. Yeah, the equation of motion tells you del tau of this is equal to 0. Okay. And the boundary condition at tau equal to plus minus infinity tells us that this itself vanishes at tau equal to plus minus infinity. So this must also vanish at tau equal to 0.
One question.
Yes.
In the bubble picture, this quantity 3 rho bar square sigma minus epsilon rho bar q, this was negative. Only then this bubble kinetic energy was transferred to the wall and
Yeah, that was a part of the classical evolution, right? But the starting point was where this is exactly 0,
yeah.
right? Then it could start evolve classically, right? Because this equilibrium analysis only give the starting point, right? This is giving you that in this one-dimensional problem, right? Equilibrium analysis tells you that it tunnels to exactly a point which has the same energy as the vacuum, right? And then from there onwards you evolve classically, right? That part is not being covered by the tunneling calculation. Right? So in the bubble picture, yes, you are right that when this becomes negative, then the energy gets transferred to the wall. But the starting point is when this is 0. After that, classically, it starts expanding, getting energy from the interior. Is this clear? So that part I will discuss in a few minutes. Okay, the classical evolution of this bubble. Okay, but right now what I am saying is that let's try to get another derivation of this. Okay, this is now a 3-dimensional integral, right? Not a 4-dimensional integral. Okay. So this is, I can write it as 4 pi integral rho r square dr of dr phi square plus dr phi minus dr phi a. The phi is the same function r minus rho. Earlier it was rho minus rho bar. At tau equal to 0, rho is the same as r, right? Mod x. So what you can do is we can again try to evaluate this and divide this contribution into 3 parts. One is when rho minus rho bar is small, okay, larger, okay, sorry, when rho minus rho bar is large and negative. One when rho minus rho bar is large and positive, and the other one is when rho is nearly equal to rho bar, right? The same kind of calculation that we did earlier, okay? Except that now this calculation is being done over a 3-dimensional slice, okay, because we are using a different scheme altogether. Now there is no question of extremizing anything, right? We are not going to extremize anything, we are only going to demand that this is equal to 0, okay, because that's what the equations of motion have given us anyway. So if you do that, then what you will get is that this quantity is 4 pi integral 0 to rho bar r square dr times d of phi b minus d of phi a. That is coming from the region when r is small. Then you will get 4 pi r square times sigma. This is coming from the region when r is of order rho bar. Where is the 4 pi r square coming from? This is just the angular integral, right? Well, 4 pi I have already taken outside, so 4 pi is not there. R square sigma. And then the region outside, rho r larger than rho bar. Okay, when r is larger than rho bar, these two terms exactly cancel. Okay, because phi goes to phi a, so plus 0. Okay. So this gives you 4 pi times minus epsilon rho bar cube by 3 plus this is rho bar square sigma. Why rho bar square sigma? It was r square to begin with, but because the contribution comes, the second contribution comes from rho r close to rho bar, right? I just replace r by rho bar and took it out of it. Right? The same kind of trick that we did right there. And now there is no extremization involved. We just want it to be 0. Right? So this should be 0. That's the equation. And you see that we get exactly the same equation for rho bar. This gives you rho bar as 3 sigma y cos. Okay, so the same after this is coming from equation of motion. Where we got this is also equation of motion, but we got it by extremizing the action. Is this clear? Okay, and in this form, this is exactly, this integral is exactly the energy of the bubble. Because the tau equal to 0 configuration matches onto t equal to 0 configuration in the Lorentzian space time, right? Because we are supposed to now take the tau equal to 0 configuration and start evolving in the Lorentzian space time. So the energy that it carries, okay, even if we didn't know that this had to be 0, okay, if you had determined rho bar by that method, you would have found that the energy is 0. Okay, a classical bubble cannot form unless energy is 0. Are there any questions? So let me just write in the line what will happen after the bubble has formed. So we have f of rho minus rho bar, right? This was the Euclidean solution. Rho was square root of x square plus tau square. Now all you have to do is that you replace this by f square root of x square minus t square minus rho bar. Okay, now you shouldn't trust this for very small x, right, where this becomes imaginary. Okay, but the solution is to be trusted near the region where f is significant. Right? That's the region when this is of order rho bar. Right? That's when f is actually changing over from phi A to phi B. So you see from here that basically the f changes over from phi B to phi A at square root of x square minus t square equal to rho bar, or x square equal to rho bar square plus t square. Okay, so it's a spherical surface whose radius is square root of rho bar square plus t square. Okay, so the bubble forms at square root of rho bar at rho bar, and then it starts expanding as time increases. Okay, and you can clearly see that once t becomes sufficiently large, it becomes mod x equal to t. Right? It expands to the velocity of light. Okay, and the interpretation is simply that it's getting accelerated because it's getting energy from what's happening inside. Okay, so the bubble basically will start expanding at the speed of light. Is this clear? So next time we'll see what the effect of gravity could do. Right? Now, of course, if all the energy scales involved are small compared to the gravitational scale, okay, then the gravity doesn't have that much effect. Well, it still has some effect because once the bubble grows sufficiently large, okay, those energy scales can become important. Okay. So, two of the important effects that will affect, in fact, what we have at present, okay, is that when the space, the false vacuum is de-Sitter, right, which are universe approximately, it is de-Sitter, then the bubble, okay, it of course expands, but it shouldn't go beyond the horizon, right, because nothing can go beyond the de-Sitter horizon. That's something we should be able to see explicitly, okay. But that is the classical part of the growth, right? That is not about the formation of the bubble, that tells us what happens as the bubble is growing.
But that information has to be put in by hand.
No, we basically have to include the metric in the game, right? And then it should become automatic from that formalism. Right? When you look at the evolution, you'll automatically see that it cannot go beyond the horizon.
In general, the bubble can have significant back reaction, right?
Yes, so all the back reaction will have to be taken into account, right? When you include the metric, you'll have to solve the full nonlinear equation involving the metric and the scalar field. Okay. So that's one effect. Another important effect is when the interior is ADS. Okay, in fact, the interior effect is also there when the interior is de-Sitter, but it's particularly important when the interior is ADS. Okay, so what is special about ADS? Okay, you remember that the first intuitive argument that we had given, we had said that the volume energy is AR cube, the surface energy is sigma r square, right? And for a sufficiently large r, the volume energy can win, right? And then beyond that r, it will start growing. Okay. But in ADS, things are different. Right? In ADS, if you are familiar with the ADS geometry, the volume and the surface grow for large r. Okay, when r is large compared to the ADS size, the volume and the surface grow in the same way. Okay. So there, having large r doesn't always mean that you will win. Okay. So there is certain critical value, okay, beyond which decay into ADS doesn't take place. Okay, so we will see what those critical values are. Okay, but intuitively we can already see that why there should be such possible obstruction, because in ADS the volume and surface don't have the same relation as we have in flat space. Okay, so we will continue next week.